because I'm going through chemo right now, and I have a little bit of fatigue, and I have a lot of the chemo brain, I'm gonna just tell you that I'm on Facebook and I'm very public. So you can look me up and friend me if you want to see the entire story, because I just can give you a little snippet in the next period of time here. But I'm happy to connect with folks on Facebook and have you, share your experiences and mine, because I really thrive on that. This is me. This is me in 2013. I'm gonna give you a little bit of background about who I am. So I have been a lifelong athlete. I was always active, into sports, very healthy. Never broke a bone, all those times playing sports. When I pitched in high school, I took a line drive to my ankle and just had a hematoma, no broken bones. I think I had a case of strep throat and ear infections. That's the extent of my medical history. So becoming a cancer survivor was never on my radar. In fact, my dad passed away when I was 15 from a heart attack. And my cholesterol at 15 and being an athlete was 256. And yeah, right? Big surprise. And so I have been chasing cardiovascular disease, looking over my shoulder my entire life. My dad passed away at 46, and I refused to let that get me. But I thought that was the thing, that if anything caught up with me, it would be. I'm going to fast forward to why this picture's up there. On December 14, 2012, I thought the worst thing that could happen during my lifetime would happen, and that was when the Sandy Hook school shooting happened. That is where my family lives. I grew up in the town over, and I have nieces and nephews that go to school there. I have a niece that at the time was a first grader at one of the other elementary schools in town. She lost 6 of her friends, including one close family friend to us. And so I spent the next I spent 2013 running for Sandy Hook. And I did it one little goal at a time, one race at a time, but I ran 26 5Ks, half marathons, and 10Ks, one for every victim. And at the end of that, because I don't do anything easily, as you'll hear more when I get into the cancer part of this, I decided to raise money for the New York City Marathon. And I ran a mile for every child and every teacher at the New York City Marathon to finish my journey that year. And what I learned along the way was that you can turn something that is so devastating and so impactful in a negative way and find the joy in it. Because every single one of those races, I met somebody, or I inspired somebody, or somebody else came along, and we found the happy in all of that. And so that kind of brings me to fast forward to July of 2016. This is me about to swim. Actually, this I think is right after the swim. I swam a mile in Lake Michigan, right out here, for cancer research. Little did I know that less than a month later I would be diagnosed with cancer. A week after I did that swim, I did a triathlon, and I noticed that I was a little short of breath on the bike, and I'm a good swimmer, so I got out of the pool, I ran to the bike, and I'm like, why can't I catch my breath? And I kind of brushed it off. I was like, oh, it's the adrenaline rushing, and I'm excited, and I'm pumped, and I'm trying to bike faster than I should be. And on the way home, after the triathlon was over, I got really tired, like really tired. Like I could have fallen asleep driving the car home back to the city. I took a nice long nap, but I really didn't think much of it. Sometime in there, after that happened, I was lying in bed one night and just sort of just touched my abdomen. No real reason, I wasn't feeling lousy, but I felt a lump. And I felt the lump next to my belly button. And kind of pushing around going, yeah, that's not right. That's not supposed to be there. But I didn't associate it with anything related to my ovaries at all. I'm like, that's too high up. Maybe it's something in my, it's a blockage or something. What organ is up there? I was an EMT at one point, and I was like drawing out my medical history, trying not to Google things, but I said, let me give it a day or two, see what happens. And it didn't move, didn't change. So I made an appointment with my primary care. went in, and she's like, yeah, that's not supposed to be there. And there wasn't really anything she found on the other side, so we did an x-ray that day, which was inconclusive. It showed a lot of stool throughout my colon, but nothing that we could really definitively find. So we scheduled a CAT scan, and I've never had a CAT scan before. I said I was healthy, x-rays were the extent of my imaging. And so I was a little nervous, and I called my mom. She lives in Connecticut, and so she was worried. She's like, do you want me to come out there for it? And I was like, no, I can handle going to the hospital by myself. But had the CAT scan about a week later, or several days later. Fast forward to August 11th, when I got my CAT scan results, when my PCP called me on the phone. It was about 4:25 on a Thursday afternoon. I can remember it like it was day. And this is a picture of what I was looking at out the window at my office. I worked down the street on Michigan Avenue. And I did it in black and white because this is what I remember. Everything kind of went to black and white that day. And she basically was pretty upfront with me. She said, I don't have good news. It looks like, and she's like, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, that you have metastatic ovarian cancer. Hard words to hear, right? Anyone in this room, all of you that are right here with me and my sisters know what those words feel like, whether you get them face to face or whether you get them on the phone or whatnot. And I remember just staring out this window. This was what I stared at the entire phone call. As she went through, here's what's going to happen next. Here's what we're going to do. Here's what we've seen. Here's what the CAT scan says, and I'm going to send you the report shortly, and you'll be able to look at it in your MyChart, and blah, all this stuff kind of running through your head. And I was still going with the you have cancer thing. So got off the phone with her, did what I need to do, called, because she said, okay, you're going to get off the phone with me, you're going to call, here's the number to make an appointment with a gynecologist, and I'm like, I don't even know what that means. And she said, great, and we'll go from there, but like most likely you'll have surgery within a week. And I'm like, going, okay, whatever, I remember my words to her, whatever I have to do, I will do to get healthy again. Bottom line. Called, made the appointment, picked a gynecologist. They said, here's the two that have appointments open. One was on Monday, one was on Tuesday. I took the Monday one because it was sooner. I proceeded to walk home. I stopped somewhere. I live in Old Town, and I stopped somewhere along the way behind a church. It wasn't Holy Name, but there's another little church tucked in over there. And I called my mom because I wasn't going to make it any further walking home without the tears starting to stream down. And my mom had just sold our family house in Connecticut and was living with my sister. She was going through her own transition of moving into the next stage of her life, and she had just found the perfect condo, and it was just a matter of time until she was going to move in. And so I dropped a big bombshell on her and telling her that I had cancer. And I told her I didn't want her to tell anybody else because I was going to come home that night or the next morning and tell my siblings. I'm the oldest of 5. And I walked home, I had a good cry, and then I started making a few phone calls. I called just a couple of my really close friends. Because contrary to what I do now, I was very closed off about this at the beginning. But went home the next day, and I think the second hardest thing in my life after hearing that you have cancer was telling my sisters. I have 3 sisters and a brother, but I wanted to tell them all personally. I didn't want my mom to tell them. I wanted to own this journey, and I told each of them in a unique way. And the most difficult part was with my nieces and nephews not being able. They didn't know what was going on. They didn't know why I was home. They didn't know why I was crying when I left, because I knew that the next time I saw them, I wouldn't have hair, and that I would look different, and that maybe I wouldn't make it. But we get through things, right? We get through things one day at a time. So came back. I spent the next 2 weeks going through a battery of tests chest X-ray. I say battery of tests, that makes it sound really exciting, right? Now it's just common. I'm coming up on my 12th CAT scan next week, and I'm like, yeah, I can just do that by myself, that's easy. So had a chest X-ray, had a colonoscopy, fun thing, yeah, that was great. Don't eat for 2 days, okay. And I had a mammogram, because I was 43 at the time, no history of breast cancer, hadn't had my first mammogram. I heard friends telling me, chastising me, I can't believe you haven't had that done, and I was like, that's the last thing I needed at that point, but I did it. Of course, then I got a call back. I got a call saying we found something. We want to take some more pictures. So my anxiety was through the roof. Fortunately, that turned out great. And I had surgery on September 2nd. So just a couple weeks after my diagnosis. I spent a week in the hospital because we had a couple of complications with my hemoglobin dropping, and I needed blood transfusions. I couldn't keep food down, so they had me off food, on liquids, off liquids, then I could eat. My mom and one of my sisters flew out and spent the week there, and I shared this part of the story because it's one of the most memorable things about my vacation in the hospital, was my mom and my sister showing up, typically before the doctors would come to do their rounds. They spent like 12 hours a day in my hospital room with me. Fortunately, I was so drugged up that I don't remember a whole lot of that, right? It's a good thing. I know my mom was on her iPad a lot because there are some pictures and a few little videos. I gotta say, I'm so glad that they were there though, and my sister especially, because she kept a notebook. I don't know how many of you have a notebook from your journey about your treatments or anything like that, or what the doctor tells you when you're actually in the office. I find that if I don't have someone with me, I have to have a notebook, so I write these things down. But my sister wrote down everything. She wrote down everything the doctor said, from the time I was wheeled back to the surgical room to the time I was checked out of the hospital, including every single time I peed and how much I peed. Because if the nurses weren't there to write it down, my sister was going to write it down. So if you really want to read something super funny, I'm happy to share that with you. So at first, I didn't tell many people because I was overwhelmed. I always thought of myself as an introvert my whole life. And I was overwhelmed by the thought of answering the questions over and over again. And I learned really quickly, because when I initially told a few people, and I started to just get bombarded with text messages from those few people, I knew that there was no way I could tell the whole world that I had cancer, my whole world, and that I was going to have this surgery and everything. So during that period of time, during the first 8 weeks of my journey, I didn't really tell many people. Slowly and slowly, that circle got a little bit bigger. I told people and gave them permission to tell others. But I needed to keep it to myself because I needed to process what this was for me, because it was so life-changing. I started chemo, and we came up with my sister came up, I'll give her credit, came up with a really fun tagline. Here's my surgery, before surgery. We'll get to this one next, but I call cancer kicking peach. Because I have little nieces and nephews, I won't say that I wasn't gonna say I'm gonna kick cancer's ass or kick an ass. So we found that the peach emoji on the iPhone looks like a butt. Right? You've never noticed that before, look at it now and you'll never be able to unsee it. But it looks like a nice butt. So kicking peach became my tagline for chemo, and everything that would really bring us something that we could smile about. Because saying kicking peach, right? That's so much more fun than saying I'm kicking ass, right? I mean, it's still the same thing. So here's my head shaving party. My best friend is holding the phone. She flew in from Dallas. My friend in the striped sweater, Shannon, she flew in from Connecticut. And the girl next to me is my niece, and the blonde woman is the woman that did the deed. So we were up in Skokie at a wig shop, and we had a party. There was champagne, there was sparkling juice for me, and there was chocolate too. So because it's not a party without chocolate. So here's me drinking my champagne, or my sparkling juice. My nephew asked me, when he knew I was gonna have to shave my head, he asked me to do a mohawk, so I did that for him. And I gotta say, ladies, if you ever have to shave your head again, do the mohawk thing. Like, it's so awesome. I felt so badass in that moment. I was like, yeah, like, cancer schmancer, like, whatever. So I've lost track of a lot of things along the way. This was 4 months later, me going home for the first time after being diagnosed with cancer with my mom. She is an amazing woman in my story. She came out for every chemo treatment, and then some. Sometimes that was awesome. Sometimes that was not so great, I'll tell you. I have a little one-bedroom apartment that turned into a two-bedroom apartment, sort of, because she'd take over the living room. And I learned one of the things I've learned is that a lot of getting through this for me is about what I can control and what I can't. So I can't control that my mom doesn't fold my laundry the way I like to fold my laundry. So I just have to let her do it, and then I refold it later on, which gives me such a great sense of accomplishment. She helped me fly home. This is when clearly I had no hair, I was losing my eyebrows. I upgraded us to first class because she deserved it. We spent the first 20 minutes on the plane sanitizing everything, which was fantastic. My CA-125 diagnosis was 216, not very high. It's never been a completely reliable thing for me. And I have been on chemo pretty much nonstop for 3 years. I have been on all the drugs, carbotaxol. I had to write them down so I could remember. I've been on Doxil, topotecan, cisplatin, Gemzar, Taxol again, so I shaved my head a second time. Cytoxin, and then I'll talk about my current treatment. This was I had a second surgery actually because about 6 months after my first one, there were still 2 little tumor lumps near my spleen, and the fluid, the CAT scan showed the fluid had, ascites had accumulated around that area. And I had to see a thoracic specialist and another medical oncologist because I thought going into surgery I might lose my spleen and part of my stomach and part of my diaphragm because of where it was. Originally, when I was first diagnosed, I should probably mention I had both ovaries had tumors on them. The one ovary was 12 or 14 centimeters. The other one was much smaller. But I also had tumor along the bottom of my diaphragm as well. So a sensitive area that we were keeping a close eye on. This was after my second surgery. My sister, again, takes amazing selfies. She documented everything. So this was right after I got out of post-op and was being wheeled into my room. This was me the first morning going for my walk. Lots of tubes flowing out. And I found my nieces and nephews really like understanding all of this stuff about the tubes. I recently showed my 10-year-old nephew pictures of my first surgery with the staples, and I realized that he could see the tattoos I have on my line. He goes, Aunt Jeannie, you have tattoos? Like, who cares about the staples? Who cares about your cancer? Wait a second, you have tattoos? Lauren, did you know? Mom, did you know? I mean, like, that became the big thing. So now I've learned to, some pictures stay not up on Facebook. I am probably, I don't know if Karen or Nancy would say I'm infamous or famous around the infusion center. And they're not even, it's a little bit of both probably. But I embrace the chemo thing. So I bring people. I found that the more people I had with me, the more fun it was. I made signs, I make signs for most of my treatments because this is about me sharing my journey. When I told you at first I didn't go very public, but at that point, I was off the first 2 months after my diagnosis and my surgery from work. And when I went back to work was when I went public and I posted on Facebook. And at that point, as someone recently, I was at a conference in San Francisco earlier this week, and someone talked about, one of the speakers talked about stepping into who you are. And what I realized is that back in November of 2016, when I did that, I stepped into who I am on this journey, and there's no stepping back for this girl. I want to embrace where I'm at and what I'm going through, and I want others to see that, because I believe that I know that that's an inspiration from what I've heard, but I believe that plays such a huge role in my survival, in uplifting me, just the same way having my family does, having my family at the hospital. And I was talking to Drew yesterday. I'm treated here at Northwestern, if it wasn't obvious already. But I said, like, I don't care if my treatment's on a different day than when I see my doctor, because I love coming to the hospital, which, who says that ever? But this is my family. This is my other family. So we have fun. 2 weeks after my second surgery, I walked my first 5K since before my diagnosis. Very slowly, very timidly, but this is who I am, and I wanted to keep doing that. A few weeks later, I ran a 5K, most of a 5K, with bunny ears on and all, and then I did it. This was my first triathlon back after diagnosis. This brings me joy, despite however crappy I'm feeling. If I'm feeling tired, fatigued, I agree the exercise is so important, and I think not just because of what it might be doing physically to fight off the cancer, but because what it does mentally, what it does to encourage you. Last year, I got to go to Stand Up to Cancer in Hollywood. I was asked at the last minute at NOCC, so we got to walk the red carpet with a lot of the stars. It was the most exhilarating experience of my life. Meeting these women, these other 3 survivors, was exhilarating. Meeting Katie Couric was great. Offering to do shots with her was great, even though I don't drink that much anymore. We had a blast. I met Madeleine Albright in the lobby of a bar in DC, which says anybody that's the first line of any story, right? I was there for work, and she was sitting there in the lobby of this hotel, and I said, "Can I take a picture with you?" And then I proceeded to tell her I had cancer, and she said, "You know, you're a strong person." She's like, "You can do this." And so just pretty cool words of inspiration. I've traveled. Cancer hasn't stopped me from living my life. This is in Aruba this past spring. I went to Paris. I've been to Italy since cancer. My family came. This looks very similar to another picture, but this is my Team Jean. My family came out. My nieces wore peach outfits, their little peach costumes. We had 2 people join our team. My former colleague at work was diagnosed with stage 1 breast cancer earlier this year, so she walked with us. And the other woman in this picture in purple is my cousin. She's a second cousin on my mother's side, who actually also has ovarian cancer. We found no connection. There's no family history. I don't have. I'm not BRCA positive. So it's just she was diagnosed a few months before me. I had never met her actually until I was diagnosed. And my mom and her mom connected, got together, and then we got together. And she's been one of my biggest supports in this journey. Ride for Hope. For those of you that aren't familiar with the Ride for Hope that happens in July, this is an amazing event. These are some amazing women. Julianne Scully puts it together. This was this past July, and just a great fun event. And this was me just a couple weeks ago, or a week and a half ago. I was in Dallas, and I did my first 5K in a year. Because currently I've been on Avastin since February, and I started Lynparza in July. I'm actually doing that combination that's in a clinical trial right now. And my energy level has been a little bit less than desirable for the last few months. And I felt a little bit unsure of what I could do, but I went down to Dallas and walked a whole 5K, and I was so proud of myself. I've done a lot of things since I was diagnosed with cancer. The one thing that's the common thread through this is that I've lived my life. And I've lived my life today. Nobody is going to tell me how much time I have left. I might have 3 days. I might have 3 months. I believe that I have my grandmother's genes. She lived to be 98, very stubborn Irish woman. I believe I'm gonna live to be 98. In fact, it's at work, it's on my bulletin board next to my computer, and my 2 goals are to be free of disease and to live to be 98. But I live life today. I do what I can today. Tomorrow, I might be more tired. In fact, I already know I'm planning to not do anything tomorrow. This week I was in San Francisco for a few days. I took the red eye back yesterday morning, was in the chemo chair yesterday afternoon, and came here today. This is the life that I live, because I have to live with intensity. I have to live with joy. I have to find that which I can do, not which I can't do. And nobody here knows how much time left. I tell people all the time when I meet them who aren't sick, right, who are healthy, I said, either of us could walk across the street, get hit by a bus, right? I'm just much more acutely aware that there's a day when this is gonna end and I'm moving on to the next thing. And so I think that's a gift. I think cancer has given me a gift, has given so many of us a gift. So it's been, and I'm gonna close with this, it's been 1,143 days since I learned I had cancer. I've lived for 1,143 days. I've had numerous CAT scans, shaved my head twice, surgery, staples, all of that. But here's what I've gotten to do. I have traveled. I have been to 5 countries. I have taken, and I added it up, I've taken close to 100 flights in 3 years, including like half a dozen of those in the last 2 weeks. I've done 2 triathlons. I've done 2 Ovarian cycle rides here in the Chicago area. And most importantly, I've made hundreds of friends, not just who are going through this journey along with me, not just my teal sisters, but I've made friends with colleagues, I've made friends with strangers, I've met so many people, and that has been probably the biggest gift. And my stepping into this, my living intensely, my living this life publicly, for people to see, I know has been inspiring to them, but it's been inspiring to me, because I, every day, get to see what I'm capable of doing. And every day I get to prove to myself that I can live this life and live it today. So I hope that all of you will continue to live the life you're leading, whatever that is, wherever you're at, whatever medication you're on. I know I'm starting to feel that anxiety for next Wednesday, because that CAT scan is going to tell us if these drugs are working or not. I mean, because I really rely on those pictures. My CA-125, and you know, I just don't trust it. But I know that no matter what those pictures show, that my team here is going to have that plan, so I don't have to worry about what's next. I don't have to worry. If these drugs aren't working, then we'll figure out what's next. But in the meantime, I'm going to live, and no one can take that away from me. So keep on living.